There's something orbiting the Earth, and according to legend, it shouldn't be there. For over 100 years, people have whispered in forums and told stories about a dark sentinel watching us. It supposedly appeared in our skies long before we ever launched a single satellite. The legend calls it the Black Knight, a 13,000-year-old alien probe, a silent observer from a lost civilization. The story is a wild mix of mysterious radio signals, Cold War paranoia, alleged astronaut sightings, and a government cover-up. But the most famous image of this so-called alien craft isn't alien at all. The incredible true story reveals how a lost thermal blanket, a string of historical coincidences, and our own love for a good mystery created one of the greatest myths of the space age. The Black Knight satellite is a fascinating conspiracy theory, but it's a theory built by stitching together a bunch of completely unrelated stories and misinterpreted photos. Weaving the legend to understand how a piece of space junk became an alien artifact, you have to follow the breadcrumbs. The legend of the Black Knight wasn't born from a single event, it was pieced together over a century from totally unrelated happenings. The story usually kicks off in 1899, with one of history's greatest minds, Nikola Tesla. While working in his Colorado Springs lab, Tesla picked up strange, rhythmic radio signals. He couldn't find a terrestrial or solar cause he knew of and was left with a wild possibility. He wrote that he might have heard the greeting of one planet to another, and speculated the signals could have come from Mars. At the time, the idea was dismissed. But for believers in the Black Knight, this was the first time humanity had accidentally eavesdropped on the alien sentinel. The next piece of the puzzle popped up decades later. Starting in the 1920s, amateur radio operators began reporting a bizarre phenomenon known as long-delayed echoes, or LDEs. They would send out a signal, and seconds later, way too long for a simple bounce off the ionosphere, the signal would come back. The delays were often several seconds long, suggesting the signal had traveled an immense distance. The phenomenon remains a curiosity, and while there are several leading scientific ideas, there is still no single, universally accepted explanation. For the mythmakers, however, the answer was simple. A mysterious object in orbit was catching their signals and throwing them back. Then came the Cold War and a whole new level of paranoia. In 1954, newspapers ran with a claim from UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe that the U.S. Air Force had found not one, but two objects in Earth's orbit. This was years before Sputnik, when no country on Earth officially had the tech to launch a satellite. The stories caused a stir but were mostly seen as sensationalism, especially since Keyhoe was promoting a UFO book. A few years later, in 1960, the story flared up again. Time magazine reported that the US Navy had spotted a dark object in a strange, near-polar orbit, and they suspected it was a Soviet spy satellite. This dark satellite became another pillar of the Black Knight legend. However, a follow-up article soon clarified that the object was debris from an American spy satellite launch. Specifically, it was attributed to the Discoverer 8 mission, which had gone off course. The legend even roped in one of America's most famous astronauts, Gordon Cooper. A story began to circulate that during his Mercury 9 mission in 1963, Cooper reported seeing a glowing green UFO that was confirmed by tracking stations on the ground. This became a key piece of evidence for a high-level cover-up. The problem? There's no evidence this ever actually happened. Neither NASA's official mission transcripts nor Cooper's personal records show any such report being made while he was in orbit. While Cooper did speak openly about his belief in UFOs later in life, the famous Black Knight story from his mission seems to be a complete fabrication. Each of these stories, Tesla's signals, the LDEs, the dark satellite, and Cooper's phantom sighting, existed as separate, mostly explained curiosities. They were just loose threads. But they were about to be woven together by one iconic image. The smoking gun in December 1998, the Space Shuttle Endeavour flew mission STS-88, the very first mission to begin building the International Space Station. Astronauts were in orbit, doing the tough job of connecting the first two modules, the American Unity node and the Russian Zarya module. And during that mission, they took a series of photos that would set the conspiracy world on fire. The photos showed a bizarre, dark, and twisted object tumbling against the curve of the Earth. It didn't look like a meteor. It looked angular, complex, and undeniably artificial. For those who had followed the scattered lore of a mystery object in orbit, this was it. The smoking gun. The Black Knight satellite, finally caught on camera. The images spread like wildfire across the early internet. Here was what looked like undeniable proof. The object's strange shape didn't match any known satellite, and some even claimed it was changing shape as it moved. The legend, which had been just a collection of unrelated anecdotes, now had a face. And that face was floating 250 miles above the Earth. The turn in the truth, but, as is so often the case with compelling mysteries, the truth is a lot more ordinary, though still fascinating. The Black Knight satellite is not a 13,000-year-old alien probe. It's not even a satellite. The whole legend is what the Armat Planetarium calls a jumble of completely unrelated stories, where people have stitched disconnected events together in over-interpreted photos. So let's pull on that thread and watch this myth unravel. The most powerful piece of evidence, that smoking gun photo from STS-88, is the easiest to explain. And the explanation comes directly from NASA and the astronauts on that mission. During a spacewalk, a thermal blanket designed to protect equipment from the extreme temperatures of space was accidentally lost. In fact, you can even hear Mission Commander Robert Cabana on the official audio log saying, "Jerry, one of the thermal covers got away from you." The object the astronauts photographed is identified by NASA and space experts as their own lost piece of insulation, tumbling away into space. Space historian and former NASA engineer James Oberg, who has spoken with the astronauts involved, has shown that the object's shape and movement are perfectly consistent with a crumpled thermal blanket. It looks weird and dark because one side is silvery and the other is black, and as it tumbles, it reflects light in strange ways. The object was tracked and eventually burned up on re-entry into Earth's atmosphere just days later. Once you know the alien satellite is really just a blanket, the rest of the legend falls apart. So, what about Nikola Tesla's signals from 1899? Some have speculated that he might have been one of the first people to ever detect signals from a pulsar, a rapidly spinning neutron star that emits radiation beams. Pulsars weren't officially discovered until decades later, so the rhythmic signals would have seemed inexplicable. Other modern hypotheses suggest he could have detected radio waves from Jupiter's magnetic field interacting with its moon, Io. In any case, it wasn't an alien satellite. And the long-delayed echoes from the 1920s and 30s? They're still a subject of scientific curiosity, but they don't require an alien explanation. Some of the leading candidate theories suggest the signals were trapped in the Earth's magnetosphere or ducted between layers of the ionosphere, traveling huge distances before returning. No credible scientific body has ever concluded they were being rebroadcast by an artificial object. And the Cold War reports? The 1954 claims came from a known UFO author promoting a book, and the 1960 dark satellite was quickly identified by the Department of Defense as debris from the US Discoverer 8 spy satellite. The legend simply chooses to ignore the official corrections that follow the sensational headlines. A story about us. So, if every piece of evidence for the Black Knight has a logical, earthly explanation, why does this myth refuse to die? Why does it keep circulating online, decades after being debunked? The answer has a lot less to do with aliens and a lot more to do with us. The Black Knight legend is a perfect case study in how modern myths are made. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. Our brains are wired to connect dots and find meaning, even in random noise. This is a phenomenon called apophenia, and it's what lets us see shapes in the clouds, or a grand conspiracy in a series of unrelated events. The Black Knight story isn't a single claim, it's a bundle of them. This makes it incredibly tough to kill. If you debunk the photo, believers can just pivot to Tesla's signals. If you explain the signals, they can point to the long-delayed echoes. The legend survives because, as one analysis puts it, it's a collection of ambiguities that have been chopped up, stirred together and stewed on the internet to one rambling and inconsistent dollop of myth. And ultimately, it's just a better story. A 13,000-year-old alien guardian is infinitely more exciting than a lost thermal blanket. The story offers wonder, secrecy, and the thrilling idea that we are not alone, with proof hiding in plain sight. It taps into our deep desire for mystery and for a universe that's bigger and more magical than our everyday lives. If you enjoy deep dives into how science and human psychology create modern myths, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because there are so many more stories like this to tell. In the end, the Black Knight satellite tells us nothing about aliens, but it tells us a whole lot about ourselves. It shows how a series of unrelated events, a misunderstood radio signal, a scientific curiosity, Cold War anxiety, and a piece of space trash, can be woven into a story so compelling that it takes on a life of its own. The truth isn't that there was nothing there. There was a radio signal. There were strange echoes. And there was a real object photographed in space. But the interpretation was wrong. The story we told ourselves about those things was pure fantasy. So the next time you see a grainy photo or a headline about a mysterious object in the sky, remember the story of the Black Knight. Before you ask, is it aliens? Maybe ask yourself, what am I really looking at? The truth is out there, but often, it's hidden not by a government conspiracy, but by our own desire to believe. What do you think? Is the Black Knight myth just a harmless piece of modern folklore, or does it show something more worrying about how misinformation spreads? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.